Moscow has confirmed that Ukraine has struck a third bridge in the Kursk region as it steps up its offensive into Russia. Ukraine says it aims to create a buffer zone along the border to prevent the Kremlin from launching further attacks. Ukraine has also been using drones to target air bases inside Russia in recent weeks. Ukraine says these bases have been used to launch attacks on its territory since the beginning of the war. Frank Ledwige is a senior lecturer in strategic studies at Portsmouth University and a former UK military intelligence officer is joining us from Oxford. Frank, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he wants to create a buffer zone inside Russia. Is that possible?
Well, it seems to be what they have done so far. They've advanced 30 to 40 kilometres, which I might say is irrelevant with respect to airstrikes. They're not going to have an effect one way or the other. May well be, by the way, we might see another smaller incursion, or who knows what size, just to the northwest. There's some indications there's one developing in the Sumy region as well. But look, that's what Zelenskyy says. I suspect it's for two political reasons, in addition or collateral to that. First, of course, is, look, we're talking about this. We're not talking about the constant Russian advances in the south and east. And the second is to create, let's call it, collateral for a potential peace deal. In other words, the Ukrainians had not much to deal with, and now they have. Let's see if they can hold on to it. Right now, their offensive do seem to be culminating. That's quite natural. And the Ukrainians don't want to run beyond their logistical reach.
Now, can you tell us why Russia has not managed to repel this incursion?
Yes, that's a great question and a very important one. I think there are several reasons for this. First is the usual tardiness with which the Russian army tends to react to things, but let's not put too much stress on that yet. This operation is only a week or 10 days old, and one wouldn't have expected large units yet to be deployed to do so. Second reason is the Russians formally see this as a counter-terrorist operation or internal security. And so the FSB, that's the old KGB, or an old money KGB, have been put in charge of this operation. And then they have broad responsibility, but they're not really heavy military, or they're not they do not possess heavy military units and probably don't have the capability to command them. That's the second thing. The third thing is I don't think the Russians are taking the bait with respect to removing experienced and more capable strike units or battalions and brigades from the east, where they are making, as I say, considerable progress. I suspect that's one of the aims for the Ukrainians, was to try and do that. The danger the Ukrainians run is that they are deploying their best units while the Russians aren't deploying their own. And things might get out of hand, I think, over the next few weeks. But let's not look ahead. Right now, it's looking positive for them.
Now, Ukraine keeps asking its Western friends and backers to allow their weapons to be used to strike targets deeper inside Russia. Do you see any chances of these limitations being lifted?
Well, there are only a few weapon systems that can reach significant distances into Russia. I think probably what they're wanting to do is use the West cruise missiles, or rather British and German and French cruise missiles, eventually on strikes at airfields and other targets. I'd like to put this into perspective. When we conducted operations against Iraq, there were 40,000 strike points, and that required a huge air campaign to have effect. It is unlikely in any circumstances that the Ukrainians will have anything like that capability. I'll give you an example, the British Storm Shadows. They may or may not get the permission to use 100 or 200 of these. Those will not cripple Russia. However, they will make a political point, and they'll put much of their air force at risk, or at the very least, move it back. Right now, of course, they're not allowed to do that. Even if they are, though, we mustn't expect that that's going to be a game changer, much like in the same way that no other weapon systems have been game changers so far.
Frank Ledwige there, as ever. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Gerhard.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Domitilla Sagramoso. She's a senior lecturer in security and development at King's College London. It's good to have you with us today. What is your take? Does the Ukrainian progress that's being reported in Kursk, does it help reduce the threat of Russian airstrikes that are targeting Ukraine?
Yes, it does, partly because the incursion that Ukraine has carried out has also been accompanied by the destruction, as you showed, of many airfields. Now, these are very far away from Kursk, and it shows that Ukrainians have been able to use drones to attack these air bases. So to a certain extent, the whole operation is supportive of this effort to prevent aerial attacks into Ukraine. But the main objective of this Kursk incursion is not primarily related to that. It's primarily related to, as was mentioned by Zelenskyy today, to create a sort of a buffer zone around the borders of Ukraine and Russia, so as to limit sort of the attacks and to place any kind of weaponry and artillery systems further away. So it does play a role in defending sort of the closer border areas to the north of Sumy in Ukraine.
And the fact that we are seeing progress by Ukraine inside Russia, what does that tell us? How vulnerable is Russia at the moment?
I think in that area, Russia is quite vulnerable. It is less vulnerable in the south, in the areas of the Donbass, where they seem to be advancing towards the very important sort of hub of Pokrovsk. But in the area of Kursk, they are much more vulnerable. They didn't have really an effective defensive structure. They had primarily reserve forces and composed primarily of conscripts, and also, as we know, the sort of the Akhmat battalion with Chechen fighters and others. And it took them quite some time to create a more effective force that could challenge the Ukrainian presence in this area. Apparently now they're sending, additional forces from other battalions or other sectors, including sort of Marines, special forces, even apparently a regiment from the airspace forces. Mm-hmm. So it shows that they really don't have the necessary forces unless they divert them from the areas of the Donbass and other areas like Zaporizhia, Kherson, or Kharkiv. So one of the objectives also of this operation in Kursk was to see if that could help divert forces from areas where the Russians are exerting a lot of pressure, mm-hmm. and primarily from the Donbass. Now, they haven't really diverted many forces from the Donbass, but the reports show that although they're creating a lot of pressure on Pokrovsk, there is less pressure, for example, around Chasiv Yar. Mm-hmm. So it seems like it has had an effect also on the Donbass.
Ukraine continues to plead with its Western backers to allow their weapons to be used to strike targets deeper inside Russia. I know you've said before that these limitations amount to Ukraine having to fight the war with one hand tied behind its back. Do you see any chance of these limitations being lifted?
Well, I think there is a lot of pressure now, especially as a result of this operation in Kursk, which has shown that the Ukrainians, when they're given the right weaponry and the ability to train forces, they can be extremely effective, because this was a very professional operation on many levels in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of organizing, mobilizing forces, carrying out what we call combined armed forces attacks. So they have shown they're professional. They've shown they can carry out the initiative when they find sort of a weak spot along the borders with Russia. So this can play in favor of allowing Ukrainians to utilize these forces. And also what it has shown is that Russia hasn't really escalated significantly. Mm-hmm. So one of the worries of the Americans when not allowing the use of long-range missiles inside Russia is that this can lead to further escalation. But what this operation has shown is that actually we haven't seen a massive escalation of Russian attacks, also because they do not have the ability to escalate a lot further. And we know so far that they are very cautious about leading towards sort of nuclear escalation. I mean, that is something they probably would want to avoid, as they would want to avoid engaging in a war directly with NATO member states. Okay. So I think that this could be an opportunity. It's still not happening. We know there is pressure. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson wrote an article this weekend putting pressure also on the Americans. But it seems the Biden administration at this moment is very worried about escalation.
Okay. Domitilla Sagramoso, Senior Lecturer in Security and Development at King's College. As always, we appreciate your time and your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.